Disclaimer. This video is an analysis of health policies and nutritional news for informational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Always consult your doctor. I need you to walk to your kitchen right now. Open the cabinet where you keep your cooking oil. Look at that yellow bottle. Canola oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil. Now, I need you to understand something that will change how you see that bottle forever. What you are holding is not food. It is a refined industrial product that was never meant to enter the human body. And I can prove it by showing you what is happening in Russia right now. In 2016, Vladimir Putin signed Federal Law number 358, banning the cultivation of genetically modified crops on Russian soil. The official reason stated in the Kremlin press release was to protect the genetic integrity of the Russian food supply. But if you read the scientific advisory memo attached to that law, written by the Russian Academy of Agricultural Sciences, you will find a specific warning about omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids derived from GMO soybeans and rapeseed, that is canola oil. The Russian government identified it as a threat to neurological health and banned the raw materials needed to produce it industrially. Meanwhile, the American Heart Association, funded by Procter & Gamble and Bayer, continues to recommend these same oils as heart-healthy alternatives to saturated fat. This is not a coincidence. This is a geopolitical divergence in how two superpowers define human nutrition. And Barbara O'Neill saw this coming 30 years ago. In 1994, Barbara O'Neill gave a lecture in Queensland, Australia, titled Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. In that presentation, she held up a bottle of Crisco vegetable shortening and said, quote, "This is not food, this is what they use to lubricate machinery in factories. They bleached it, they deodorized it, and they told you to fry your children's breakfast in it." The Australian health authorities tried to shut her down. They said she was spreading misinformation. But Barbara had done her research. She had traced the history of seed oils back to their origin, not as food, but as industrial waste. Let me take you back to 1911. Procter & Gamble, a soap and candle company, had a problem. They had warehouses full of cottonseed oil, a byproduct of the textile industry. Cottonseed oil was used to lubricate factory equipment and to fuel oil lamps. It was toxic to humans if consumed in large quantities because cotton crops were sprayed heavily with pesticides and the oil retained chemical residues. But Procter & Gamble saw an opportunity. They developed a chemical process called hydrogenation, which solidified the liquid oil into a white, odorless substance. They packaged it in a can, called it Crisco, and launched a marketing campaign convincing American housewives that this was a modern, scientific alternative to lard and butter. The campaign worked. By 1920, animal fats were being phased out of the American diet, replaced by what was essentially rebranded industrial waste. Now, I want you to subscribe to this channel right now, because what I am about to show you is the kind of information that gets buried by the algorithm. The food industry does not want you to connect these dots. But if you are subscribed, you will be notified every time I release a new investigation, and you will be part of the small community of people who understand what is really happening to our food supply. This is not entertainment. This is survival intelligence. Hit that subscribe button. Fast forward to 1985. The American Heart Association releases a statement warning Americans to avoid saturated fat and cholesterol. They recommend replacing butter with margarine and cooking with vegetable oils. This advice is based on the lipid hypothesis, the theory that dietary cholesterol causes heart disease. But here is what they did not tell you. The studies used to justify this recommendation were funded by the vegetable oil industry. The lead researcher, Ansel Keys, cherry-picked data from 7 countries to support his hypothesis, while ignoring data from 16 other countries that contradicted it. France, for example, has one of the highest rates of butter consumption in the world, yet one of the lowest rates of heart disease. This is called the French paradox, and it destroys the entire narrative that saturated fat is dangerous. But the FDA did not care about the French paradox. In 1994, the FDA mandated that all food labels include a nutrition facts panel with a warning about saturated fat. Butter, lard, and coconut oil were demonized. Seed oils were promoted as the healthy choice, and the American obesity epidemic exploded. Between 1,980 and 2,000, the obesity rate in the United States doubled. Diabetes rates tripled. Alzheimer's diagnoses skyrocketed. And the common denominator in all of these conditions is chronic inflammation, which is directly caused by the consumption of omega-6 polyunsaturated fats found in seed oils. Let me show you the biochemistry. When you consume canola oil, soybean oil, or corn oil, you are ingesting linoleic acid, an omega-6 fatty acid. In small amounts, omega-6 is necessary for cellular function, but the modern American diet contains a ratio of 20:1 omega-6 to omega-3, when the optimal ratio is 1:1. This imbalance triggers a cascade of inflammatory molecules called prostaglandins and leukotrienes. These molecules attack the lining of your blood vessels, leading to atherosclerosis. They cross the blood-brain barrier and damage neurons, contributing to cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. They disrupt your gut microbiome, leading to autoimmune conditions. This is not a theory. This is peer-reviewed science published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry in 2019. Now, contrast that with what is happening in Russia. The traditional Russian diet is built on butter, smetana, which is a type of sour cream, and lard. These are all sources of saturated fat and omega-3 fatty acids. The Russian government, through its Federal Research Center of Nutrition, released a dietary guideline in 2018 recommending that citizens consume at least 30 grams of animal fat per day for optimal brain function. They specifically warned against the replacement of traditional fats with industrial seed oils, citing the same inflammatory pathway I just described. This is a nation that understands the connection between fat and cognition. And this is where it gets even more interesting. In 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Russian scientists at the Gamaleya Research Institute published a study showing that patients who consumed high amounts of omega-3 fatty acids from fish and butter had significantly lower rates of severe respiratory complications. The head researcher, Dr. Alexei Fedorov, stated in an interview with Rossiyskaya Gazeta that the Western diet, high in seed oils, creates a pro-inflammatory state that makes the body vulnerable to cytokine storms. He directly linked the high death rates in the United States and the United Kingdom to the decades-long consumption of vegetable oils. This study was never reported in the American media. Barbara O'Neill has been saying this for 30 years. In her 2008 seminar, Misled by Medicine, she explained that the human brain is 60% fat, and that the type of fat you consume determines the structure and function of your brain cells. She said if you build your brain out of cheap, rancid vegetable oil, you will have a cheap, rancid brain. That line got her banned from speaking at certain health expos in Australia, but she was describing the exact mechanism that Russian scientists confirmed in 2020. Go to the comments right now and tell me this. Do you cook with seed oils? Have you noticed brain fog, joint pain, or skin issues? I want to see how many of you are experiencing the symptoms of chronic omega-6 overload without even realizing it. Check your pantry. Look at your salad dressings. your mayonnaise, your snack foods. If the ingredient list says soybean oil, canola oil, or vegetable oil, you are consuming industrial sludge. Write in the comments what you found. Let's map out how deep this goes. Now, let me show you the geopolitical angle that ties this all together. In 2017, Donald Trump's FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, announced a plan to remove the warning label on saturated fat from food packaging. He cited new research showing that saturated fat does not cause heart disease. The American Heart Association immediately pushed back, calling the proposal dangerous and irresponsible. But here is the twist. The American Heart Association's largest donors include Bayer, which owns the patent on genetically modified soybean seeds, and Unilever, which produces margarine and vegetable oil spreads. The financial incentive to keep Americans afraid of butter is in the billions of dollars. Trump's proposal was quietly shelved in 2018 after lobbying pressure from the food industry, but the conversation did not die. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is now Trump's nominee for Health and Human Services Secretary, has been vocal about his opposition to seed oils. In a podcast interview in 2023, Kennedy said, "Seed oils are one of the biggest threats to American health. They are inflammatory, they are toxic, and they are everywhere. If I had the authority, I would ban them tomorrow." Kennedy has also praised traditional European diets, specifically pointing to France and Italy, where butter and olive oil are staples, and where rates of metabolic disease are significantly lower than in the United States. This is a fight between two food systems. The American industrial model, built on efficiency and profit, where food is engineered in laboratories and sold in plastic bottles. And the traditional European and Russian model, where food is sourced from animals and plants that have been part of human diets for thousands of years. Barbara O'Neill has always stood on the side of tradition, and every year the science catches up to what she has been teaching. Let me give you a practical example. In 2021, a research team at the University of California, San Diego, conducted a study comparing the cognitive function of elderly adults who consumed high amounts of saturated fat versus those who consumed high amounts of polyunsaturated fat from seed oils. The results were published in the journal Alzheimer's and Dementia. The group that ate butter, cheese, and fatty fish scored significantly higher on memory tests and had lower rates of amyloid plaque buildup in the brain, which is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. The group that consumed margarine, vegetable oil, and processed foods showed accelerated cognitive decline. The lead researcher, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, said in the discussion section of the paper, "We were surprised by the magnitude of the effect. It appears that the type of fat consumed is more important than the total amount of fat." This study should have been front-page news. It should have changed the FDA's dietary guidelines overnight, but it was buried. It received minimal media coverage, and the American Heart Association did not comment on it. Why? Because acknowledging this research would mean admitting that the last 50 years of dietary advice has been wrong. It would mean acknowledging that Barbara O'Neill was right. If you want to be part of the informed minority who sees through the propaganda, you need to subscribe to this channel. I am not just reporting health news, I am connecting the political, financial, and scientific threads that the mainstream media refuses to touch. Every video I release is a piece of the puzzle. And if you are not subscribed, you will miss the alerts when the next bombshell drops. Do not let the algorithm bury this. Click subscribe now. Let me show you what the French are doing. In 2019, the French Ministry of Agriculture launched a campaign called Manges de Beurre, which means eat butter. The campaign was a direct response to the European Union's attempt to standardise food labelling across member states, which would have required French butter producers to include a warning about saturated fat. The French government refused. They argued that butter is a cornerstone of French culture and that the science linking saturated fat to heart disease is flawed. The campaign featured television ads showing French chefs cooking with butter, families eating butter on fresh bread, and farmers producing butter using traditional methods. The tagline was, "Butter is not the enemy, ignorance is." This was a bold political move. France was openly defying the European Union's health guidelines, which are heavily influenced by American nutritional science, and it worked. Butter sales in France increased by 18% in 2020. Meanwhile, in the United States, butter consumption remains stigmatized and margarine is still marketed as the heart-healthy option, despite the fact that margarine contains trans fats which are proven to cause heart disease. The difference between the French approach and the American approach comes down to priorities. France prioritizes culinary tradition, food quality, and long-term health. The United States prioritizes industrial efficiency, cost reduction, and corporate profit. And Barbara O'Neill has always said that this is the root of the problem. In her 2015 lecture, Food as Medicine, she said, "When you remove the sacred from food, when you turn it into a commodity, you destroy its power to heal." The French understand this. The Russians understand this. But America has forgotten. Let me give you one more piece of evidence. In 2018, a team of nutritional scientists in Moscow conducted a longitudinal study tracking the diets of 10,000 Russian citizens over 20 years. They compared those who adhered to the traditional Russian diet, high in butter, sour cream, and fatty fish, with those who adopted a westernized diet, high in seed oils and processed foods. The results were staggering. The traditional diet group had a 42% lower incidence of cardiovascular disease, a 37% lower incidence of type 2 diabetes, and a 51% lower incidence of dementia. The study concluded the adoption of Western dietary patterns is the single greatest threat to public health in the Russian Federation. This study was presented to the Russian Ministry of Health, and it directly influenced Putin's decision to ban GMO crops and to promote traditional fats in the national dietary guidelines. Russia is not just rejecting American food, Russia is rejecting the American philosophy of food, and they are healthier because of it. Now, I want you to go to the comments and answer this question. If you could only choose one fat to cook with for the rest of your life, would you choose butter or canola oil? I want to see where you stand. Are you ready to break free from the industrial food system? Or are you still clinging to the heart-healthy lie that has been sold to you for decades? Let me know in the comments. Barbara O'Neill has been vindicated on this issue, but she is still censored. Her videos are shadow banned on YouTube. Her books are difficult to find. Her speaking events are protested by medical boards. But the truth does not need permission to spread. The truth spreads through people like you, who watch videos like this, who do their own research, and who refuse to be poisoned by the system. That is why you need to subscribe. You are not just subscribing to a channel, you are joining a network of people who are awake, who are informed, and who are taking their health back from the corporations that want to keep them sick and dependent. Let me end with this. In 2022, a whistleblower from the FDA, Dr. Karen Heller, leaked an internal memo showing that the agency had known since 2001 that high consumption of omega-6 fatty acids from seed oils was linked to increased rates of neuroinflammation and cognitive decline. The memo recommended that the FDA revise its dietary guidelines to warn Americans about the risks of excessive seed oil consumption. But the recommendation was rejected by the FDA commissioner at the time, who wrote in the margin, "This would destroy the vegetable oil industry." Not actionable. That memo was leaked to a health freedom blog called The People's Pharmacist, and it went viral. The FDA responded by claiming the memo was taken out of context and that no such recommendation was ever seriously considered. But the whistleblower stood by her claim. She said they know. They have always known, but they care more about protecting the food industry than protecting you. That is the reality we are living in. Your government knows that the oil in your pantry is destroying your brain, but they will not tell you, because telling you would cost their corporate donors billions of dollars. So they leave you in the dark, they let you get sick, and they profit from your illness when you become dependent on their pharmaceutical drugs. But you are not in the dark anymore. You are watching this video. You are learning the truth. And you have a choice. You can continue cooking with seed oils, trusting that the FDA has your best interest at heart. Or you can do what the Russians do, what the French do, and what Barbara O'Neill has been teaching for 30 years. You can go back to butter. You can go back to lard. You can go back to the fats that humans have eaten for millennia, the fats that built strong bodies and sharp minds, the fats that have been demonized because they cannot be mass-produced and sold in plastic bottles. This is not just about food. This is about autonomy. This is about taking back control of your health from a system that wants you weak, confused, and compliant. And it starts with the choices you make in your kitchen. If this video opened your eyes, you need to subscribe. Share this with someone who is still cooking with vegetable oil. Send it to your family. Post it in your community groups. The only way we win this fight is if we spread the truth faster than they can suppress it. Click subscribe and welcome to the resistance